Hello, everybody. I'm Lee Moriarty, and I'm the Deputy State Long-Term Care Ombudsman for Illinois. And I want to welcome you to the Resident and Family Support Council meeting that we hold on the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month at 3 o'clock Illinois time. The reason why I'm saying Illinois time is Stephen and I, my cohort, we're in California this week at a consumer voice conference, but I think Stephen's going to be alluding to that a little bit in his presentation. So I'll let him talk a little bit more about that. But before we go there, I want to just let everybody know as a reminder that we do record these and that it will be on YouTube at the IL Ombudsman YouTube page. So just remember you can do that, and we'll be putting those links into the chat. As well as we also want to make sure that if you're on Facebook, like us on Facebook. We always advertise the meetings on that as well. Then our website always has the past meetings linked to the recording, as well as to the link to be able to get into this meeting, which is the same link for every single solitary meeting. So put that in a safe place for yourself so that you can get to these meetings without any problem. The purpose of our meeting is to empower people with information. And with empowerment being such an important thing for all of us as we're navigating this aging path, today we're going to be talking about residents' rights, because everybody has rights. And we're actually going to be starting with hearing from Stephen Maxwell, who many of you have seen on our calls. He's usually the guy working in the background, putting a bunch of links into the background. So we actually get to see Stephen's face today as he's going to be presenting this topic. And he will be joined by a couple of volunteers from the Ombudsman program, which we're really excited about. So I'll let him go ahead and start all of this and do the other further introductions. Stephen, you can share your screen at any time if you had wanted to.
All righty, great. And my apologies to everyone who has to see my face. We went through 3 webcams before we found one that worked. Uh, all right, I got to figure out how to share. I don't think I've shared in this app before.
It's the green button. You'll see a big arrow button.
Oh, there we go.
They've redesigned this a little bit. So
okay. Trying to make it bigger, make it the full size.
If you go to show, then you should be able to, at the bottom, I don't know if you see the little, right next to the sound, the large bar. There you go. There you go.
All right, perfect. Perfect. Now I get to have the full Lee Moriarty experience of doing the slideshow and having all of this. As Lee said, my name is Stephen Maxwell. I am the Ombudsman Training Coordinator for the state of Illinois. Prior to joining the state, I've been with the state since February. Prior to joining the state, I was a regional ombudsman in the Quincy area. Very much boots on the ground with that job. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about Resident Rights Month. Just give a brief history and some ways that you can celebrate it as an ombudsman, as a facility staff, and most importantly, as a nursing home resident. So the beginning, in 1975, the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care was founded. This brought together advocates for nursing home reform. So I guess really before this, though, I need to go into a very brief history of nursing homes. Starting in or at least in my experience, starting in the 30s, 40s, we started seeing this hospital model of long-term care where people were staying in hospitals for a long time, and they couldn't go home, but they couldn't stay in the hospital. So nursing homes started springing up as a way to take care of people in the long term. Now, this was a great advancement over, say, the poor farm model where you lived and worked as much as you could in the home. There might be some care, but it was provided by other residents. So it was an improvement, but we needed to go further. And so that's where the National Consumer Voice came in. In 1981, Residents' Rights Week was founded by nursing home residents who were attending the Consumer Voice Conference. And it was a way to celebrate residents' rights separate from Nursing Home Week in May. Now, the neat thing about this is Lee mentioned that we're out of town. We are in San Francisco at the Consumer Voice Conference. So it's kind of neat. And my math is bad, but that's about 43 years of Residents' Rights Week, Residents' Rights Month, which, if I haven't mentioned it, Residents' Rights Month starts in October. So Nursing Home Week, in contrast, Nursing Home Week is meant to more celebrate the nursing homes and the nursing home staff, whereas Residents' Rights Week celebrates the residents and their lives, their rights. In 1987, OBRA 87 was passed by Congress and expanded nursing home residents' rights exponentially. There have been a few updates since then that have expanded things, and Illinois has certainly added on more rights. For instance, electronic monitoring is a right in Illinois. But 1987 was a big year for residents' rights. In 2011, Residents' Rights Week was expanded into an entire month as a way to give more time to celebrate, give more attention to residents' rights. Each year has its own unique theme. Don't ask me what previous years were, because I did not include them in this presentation. But this year, it's the power of my voice. It's very important to understand how much power you as a nursing home resident have in your voice. And it's one that not enough people use, unfortunately. I see when I was working in the nursing homes, as a regional ombudsman, I would see people who would speak up to me, but then as soon as it came time for them to talk to an administrator about their problems, they became silent. Family members would call me and say, "Oh, mom's having this problem, that problem, the next problem." And then I'd go and talk to the resident and they'd say, "Oh, no, I don't have a problem." They were telling their family members. It's being recorded. They were telling their family members about their problems, but they weren't telling their ombudsman. They weren't telling their nursing home staff, the people who can actually make the change. Your voice is very powerful, and we need to encourage you all to use it. I'm getting a little bit of an echo, so if everyone could remember to mute themselves, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
And I'll look to see if I can take care of that too.
Okay, thank you. We have several resources available to everyone. You can see the link there, and Karen, I apologize, I should have sent you the link beforehand so you could put it into the chat, but that link will give you a lot of resources. You can also scan the QR code to the left. And of course, your ombudsman is a great resource for residents' rights and Residents' Rights Month. At this link, at this page, you'll find information on what your rights are. It's very important just to know what your rights are. And again, your ombudsman can provide you with a list of your rights. You will also find a document called My Personal Directions for Quality Living. And that's really important because it has things that you wouldn't normally think of, like my chosen family is, and you can list your chosen family as opposed to your actual family, because sometimes those are different. You can write down your chosen name or your nickname, which is important. um, my dad, for instance, he didn't know his first name until he was 5. He's always gone by his middle name, and he had to be hospitalized a few years ago. I called up the hospital and I asked for him, and they said, "Oh yeah, Robert, I'll connect you to Robert." I'm like, "Who?" So, and I had a little conversation with the nurse, like, "No, it should not be Robert on his door. Don't call him Robert. That's not his preferred name." And so they made sure to start calling him by his preferred name, instead of his first name. Um,
That directions for personal living. Just to talk about that just for a minute there, Stephen. That is really a great way for staff who work with you, the individual that lives in the long-term care community, to get to know who that person is, so to help develop that relationship. So, as Stephen is alluding to, it is that opportunity for people to know who you are, what you want, what your life should look like, what you want to be called,
mhm.
so that people honor that, and it creates a greater sense of connectivity with the care provider as well as the individual that lives in the long-term care community. So it's a really cool thing, and I would really encourage people to consider downloading that and filling it out. So
Yeah,
just
and it can be very helpful, in addition to your normal everyday staff. If you've got agency staff in your home, or if somebody switched from night shift to day shift, um, that document, that's going to be very important for them to be able to see, okay, this is how I should be interacting with that person. Hopefully they take the time to actually look over the document. um, there's information on how to set up individualized care. Your care plans shouldn't be copy and pasted, and we unfortunately we see that throughout the state, where they'll copy and paste care plans. Sometimes they will copy paste and forget to take out diagnoses. um, I've heard of instances where they will copy from a woman's care plan to a man's program care plan and forget to change the pronouns. Like, that should not be happening ever. Um, it should be individualized to you as the resident. There's also tips on effective communication, effective problem solving, how to advocate for better care, and tips on self-care. That's very important for your mental health and your physical health, which really, when you get down to it, they're one and the same. So I want to talk to the, can everyone see my screen still?
mhm.
Okay. I tried to move the pictures and it messed things up a little bit on me. Um, so I want to talk to the facility staff, the administrators who might be on today, about the reasons why your facility should celebrate Resident Rights Month. Celebrating Residents' Rights Month can help you educate your staff. It's an annual requirement to educate your staff on residents' rights. This can help. If you're celebrating residents and their rights, that's going to help you build your relationship with them. Everyone likes to be celebrated. Everyone loves their rights, and that's going to help build that relationship. You're going to increase community awareness of residents' rights. This one is huge. I think every single facility has had at least one family member or one friend, one person in the community who tries to insert themselves into a resident's lives a little too much. Maybe they'll come in and say, well, I'm the POA, you have to listen to me. And I think I have a doorbell in here. I'm not sure. A chime just went off in my room. I have no idea what that's about. But um anyway, um I
Yes,
think we've
Terry.
all had, huh?
Yeah, I just didn't know if we got distracted from the doorbell. About that purpose for really uh, increasing that community awareness about what those residents' rights are all about.
Yeah, if you increase community awareness, then that family member who's trying to insert themselves a little too much,
Mhm.
um, that awareness of the residents' rights in the community is going to help you out at the end of the day, because you'll be able to focus on the resident and what the resident wants instead of that family member who's being a little overbearing and trying to control too much.
And I think that that's a point worth noting a little bit further, just to make sure that everybody's hearing this equally, about that POA. And I know you were starting to talk about that. The person's power of attorney for healthcare, they only should be stepping in when someone loses their voice. And I think that's important for the long-term care communities to really be mindful of that. If somebody can articulate what it is that they want, that power of attorney does not kick in. And what I always use is I have a power of attorney myself. My daughter's my power of attorney. And if my daughter ever tried to be the one to step in and say what I wanted at this point in my life, I'd be like, absolutely not. My voice is still very strong.
Yep.
So if I had to go into a nursing home for rehab tomorrow, or I had to go into a nursing home and I was still very decisional, um, it's not my daughter's place to be making decisions for
Mm-hmm.
me, or is she to be the one to be communicated with over me. It's my life. It's not my daughter's life. So it's important for
Yeah,
people
and
to know that.
I have sat in care plan meetings that were all about the POA and what the POA wanted, even though the resident had a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So increasing community awareness can be important.
Yes.
And then celebrating Residents' Rights Month is going to highlight your facility's dedication to promoting residents' rights and person-centered care. That's important because maybe the nursing home across town isn't celebrating residents' rights. If you're a consumer, I'm speaking to your wallets here. If you're a consumer looking at a nursing home, are you going to pick the one that celebrates rights or doesn't celebrate rights? I'm going to look more at the one that's celebrating my rights and celebrating person centered care, promoting that. I'm going to look to them first. So, just some things to consider as to why you, as a facility, should celebrate Residents' Rights Month. So, we've got a few volunteers, a few ombudsmen on, and I wanted to bring them on. If you could go ahead and unmute yourselves and talk about some ideas that you've had and what you're working on to celebrate Residents' Rights Month.
Hi, all. This is Jackie Gregory, and I'm a volunteer community ombudsman in Evanston. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And
Okay, awesome. Sorry.
before you
test.
begin, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that the Ombudsman program does have volunteers that work with it. So that might be something that people are not aware of. And these are dedicated people who have come forward that want to be able to assist in advocating for people that live in long-term care. And a volunteer ombudsman has the same exact training that a paid ombudsman has. So again, that's really important to know, is that our volunteers in Illinois and across the country are mandated to have the same exact training. So just because someone's a volunteer doesn't mean that they don't truly understand what it means to be a volunteer. So that's it's an amazing, we are just amazed with the people that step forward to become volunteers. So I just want to publicly thank you for stepping forward and doing that as well.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe one or two of my colleagues are also on the line, Mary Ellen and Sue.
Well, Mary Ellen is here. I'm also a volunteer in Evanston. And I also live part of the year in Florida, and I'm an ombudsman in Florida as well.
Hey, that's wonderful. That's really great.
That I can imagine. I don't want to get into it now, but I mean I can imagine that being very tough, having to know two different sets of rules for the home. So uh,
I
thank you.
have a lot to learn yet. Yes.
And the volunteers in Florida, actually, just to talk about that for a minute, the Florida Ombudsman Program is run predominantly by volunteers. So it's a very huge volunteer program down there. I'm actually presenting at this Consumer Voice Conference with a member from your state who is working with their Pioneer Coalition, Chris Moutry. So just if, I don't know if you're aware of him or not, but
Yeah,
yes,
no, I know that name. Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
But anyway, getting back onto topic, what are you doing for Residents' Rights Month?
You want to start off, Mary?
Well, I could.
Go ahead.
We've had a lot of fun actually the last few weeks. Jackie and I met when we were in Steve's training in July here in Chicago area, and we just started talking. And Jackie's the one that actually mentioned to me that October is Residents' Rights Month, which I hadn't been aware of. So it started with a couple little ideas, and now it's kind of exploded into um just offering a lot to our facilities, a lot of choices on how they might want to celebrate this month.
Yeah.
Jackie, you had so
Yeah.
many good ideas this morning. Go ahead.
Right. And so one of the things, just to piggyback off of what Stephen was saying about that community awareness, that is a key piece to how we're approaching it. We want to remind the residents that, change begins with conversation first, and then it can be implemented through community awareness and involvement. So our regional, Candace Mitchell, who's fantastic and very creative, she's come up with a residents' rights anthem song. And the melody is to "This land is your land, this land is my land." And so one of the ideas that we're playing around with is, taking those lyrics, placing it on maybe a brightly colored piece of paper, possibly laminating it, giving it to the residents. So, my residents a lot of them are musical. So we might end up having like a mini jam session, but it's the words of the song will help to resonate the idea that, you have rights. And so not only through October, but throughout your duration while you're in the nursing facility. And the idea behind this colored piece of paper, even if it's like, under a book, or under their bed or something like that, that color, whether it be a bright, ombudsman blue or yellow, it would kind of jog their memory to what we're doing throughout October, that whole little, the lyrics and the sentiment behind the song. Another thing that I have that I'm doing with the facility that I'm at is kind of like a resident roundtable, similar to our monthly resident council meetings, but a little different in that it's strictly residents. The staff will not be there, and the activity will segue into my conversation about the structure of resident council meetings and what the regulations state. And the overall goal is to present them with the opportunity for them to revisit how it's currently set up, because sometimes it's not really resident run. We might talk about topics that pertain to them, but their voice isn't being really exercised. Another thing that I have on my list that Candace and Mary Ellen created, it's a residents' rights hat game, where we take the brochure that we hand out to the residents and their family, rights that are listed in there. We place them in a hat. I'm also including some other regulations like that pertain to ADLs, like, the shower frequency, care plan meetings, and, healthcare providers and visitors and things of that nature. We place all of those rights in a hat. They pick a right out, and then they can read it aloud. They state what it means to them. If they feel like the facility and the staff are adhering to that right. If so, how? If not, how is it being violated and what would they like to see happen? And from there, I also have created something that's going to kind of be the last portion of the Residents' Rights Month activity, and it's called the mic drop moment. And so I don't know if everyone on the call is familiar with the expression, drop the mic. It's kind of an expression that means you say something profound, nothing else needs to be said afterwards. So it's kind of like full stop. And so I have this beautiful electric blue microphone, and then there's also a gold one. And so the idea behind it is, once again, we would be revisiting those rights. And then you would stand up, like, for instance, I would say, my name is Jackie. I'm an ombudsman, and I have the authority and right to advocate on behalf of long-term care residents without any interference. And I will do just that. And then I'll drop the mic because enough is said.
I love that. I love that, Jackie. That is really, really cool. That's really great.
And then I think just another thing that I want to implement, because a lot of, once again, my group, they're creatives, and unfortunately their art room has been closed down, but I want to utilize some of those on-site supplies that are still left from that defunct art room, and allow them to create individual pictures or a painting. And I'm still kind of deciding if it'll be kind of like a paint and sip, but with water, where it's a guided picture, and that picture might be of a megaphone or a microphone. Once again, tying in the whole theme for next month, or it might simply be like an abstract, like, art piece that, I can find on YouTube, how we, take a Q-tip and create something with it. But allowing them that expression of art and just engaging them with something that they don't always consistently get, but we know that they should be getting.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Love it. What a great idea. And these are things that people could easily do. Wonderful, Jackie.
Right. So we kind of looked at things, I think, in two different ways. One is looking at our facilities and where do we see a need that we could cover in October. And one of my facilities has just dropped having resident council meetings, like maybe 6 months ago. And so my goal in October is to get those up again and running, and at a much higher level than I was looking at some of their notes from previous ones, and they weren't much. I mean, there's a whole lot more that they need to be doing, and a lot more education for staff on how to proceed with that. So aside from, we have the different activities that Jackie was just describing, and we have our anthem. We also we have a couple of facilities here that have had problems with sexual abuse. So bringing in people who can talk to the residents about those issues. And so we have like a bigger issue, I mean, that we as ombudsman can see is the need, but also ways that they can internalize all the different rights and and learn themselves as we go through the month. We have 10 true and false statements that you really have to kind of know the rights, and it's
Right.
especially good for the staff too. And how well would they do tomorrow? I'm going to meet with one, and I'm really curious to see how the staff will do when we work on that, one little piece. Anyway, I also like that Jackie had an idea of a final event that maybe we would showcase any of the art projects, any poetry, or, whatever people want to produce this month, and bring in family and other outside community partners, and see if we can't just make a much bigger deal of it as the month comes to a close.
That would be really cool. Like a gallery, do an art gallery showing.
Mm-hmm.
That would
Yeah.
be really, yeah, really, really nice. I
And-
and these ideas that you guys are sharing, I also see them, Mary Ellen, like you had said, from the staff, increasing the staff awareness as well. As Stephen said,
Mhm.
one of the goals of Residents' Rights Month is to make the people who actually work and serve those that live in long-term care more aware. And Jackie, even your idea of putting it in a hat, going around to staff and having them pull it right out and say, how would it feel not to have that right?
Right. And I can't take credit for that. That was Mary Ellen and our regional Candace that came up with that. But
Yeah.
for me, the piece where I want to pull my staff in, because, and I know as ombudsman, we are non-political, but because we are so close to the election, the goal is to have the staff discuss with the residents how they adhere to the federal regulations pertaining to election voting, whether it be in just asking them to lay out their plan for voter registration, absentee ballots or mail-in voting. So just kind of putting the ball in their court to answer any, because I've had a couple of residents mention it to me, right? And so once again, pulling the staff in, allowing them to present whatever, game plan that they should have in place per regulations for 6 weeks from now?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we did a resident and family support council meeting on the right to vote last February, I want to say. So it's recorded on the YouTube channel. So everybody, whether you live in long-term care, you have a loved one, or you work in long-term care, you should review that to make sure, because it is a right. They discuss the whole process to it, what the regulations actually state around it. So it could be a really important training mechanism or awareness mechanism for everybody to make sure that we're adhering to this right to vote, because we have a presidential election, and that's the highest office in our country, and everyone really should be getting out there and voting.
And one thing to keep in mind, I tend to think to myself, okay, I need to do this, but I'll do it next week. I'll do it later. And then when later comes, I put it off more. Right now, with the election, if you are not registered to vote, you need to do that as soon as possible, because there are deadlines for that. So make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure if you're registered elsewhere, say you just moved into a long-term care facility, you can get an absentee ballot and vote in your old jurisdiction. But just make sure you're on it right now rather than putting it off.
Right.
If anybody else that's also a part of this meeting today has any ideas on other things or things that they're going to do, or even any other ideas, even just from hearing Mary Ellen and Jackie share some things that they're doing, an idea that popped into your head, do feel free to unmute yourself and share that idea with us, because this is what it's about. Let's get creative in how we do it. I know typically the training for long-term care in long-term care for the staff to get it about rights is we kind of basically just give them a piece of paper and say, make sure you know these, because you have to be getting serviced on this every year. That's the terminology that gets used. You have to be in serviced on this every year. And it just gets handed to staff, and staff kind of read it, or somebody might just read it off to them, but it doesn't have that meaning and value. Hearing that people have the right to unopened mail, for example, which is one of the rights. Hearing that, just saying people have the right to unopened mail is one thing, but another to say, if you got your mail and it was opened, how would that make you feel? Would that make you feel that this is your private property? Somebody else chose to open that up for you without asking your permission. How would that make you feel? Brings it to a different level, you know? Because sometimes on the surface, it's like, of course people shouldn't get their mail open. But then when you think about when it does happen, because it does happen sometimes in long-term care communities. How does that feel to have that violation happen for you? Using the phone in private. Of course, everybody should be able to use the phone in private, right? Of course, everybody should. How would it feel if you wanted to talk to your loved one? I'm in a long-term care community. I haven't spoken to my husband for a while, and I want to talk to him on the phone. And I've got to go to the nurse's station to call my husband to talk about what's going on in our lives so that everybody else can hear everything that's being said. Would not feel very good to me. So these are the
Well,
things to bring it to the personal level.
and Lee, I'm not just the residents' right to private phone calls, but the everybody else's right to not have to hear those private phone calls. Because I've had a few residents who they've got girlfriends who live outside of the facility, and they'll, one of them would sit there in the kitchen where the community phone was. It was kind of open concept facility where residents could go in the kitchen. He's sitting in the kitchen on the phone, dirty talking with his girlfriend. Like,
Yeah,
all
that
the
makes
other
everybody
residents,
uncomfortable.
yeah, the other residents have the right to not have to hear that. So yeah, phone,
Yeah.
like, some of these rights are pretty darn simple, and we'd be greatly impacted if they were taken away from us. And Mary Ellen and Jackie, if we need to, if you need to talk about this with Candace, and if you need to talk with the state office later about it, um, share what you're doing on social media.
Okay.
The Ombudsman program, the state program, we have a Facebook page. So if you want to share something with us that we can then share, um, anything we can do to promote residents' rights and the good work that you all are doing in promoting them.
Awesome.
Yeah, would love that. And to let you know, here we are at this Consumer Voice conference right now. And this morning we had CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, spoke to us this morning. And they talked about initiatives that they're doing and some of the things that they're doing in order to make sure that life is good for those who live in long-term care. And just to highlight some of those things, because it really does help empower, which is what all these rights are about. One of the things that they're doing is they always had a guide on their website on how to choose a nursing home, but they actually just took a look at it and they've revised it. So that's, again, something else, another way to be empowered, to understand that this is your right to make your choice of where you want to live. And that can even happen, that's even a right you have before you go into the nursing home, to make that empowered care choice. Another resource that they're also they put out on the CMS's website is they said, they heard from people, we don't know how to make this care choice. So that's why they did this one, the one I just spoke about. And then the other side is we hear from people that live in long-term care and they're like, what should we expect? What is it that life should look like when we live in long-term care? So they put together a resource material for that as well. And that really so much is centered around what your rights are as an individual who lives in long-term care. The regulations that were written by the federal government were written all around residents' rights. If you look at the federal regulations, it's probably about, if you were to print them off, I'd say it's probably about 4 or 5 inches deep in the regulation. And residents' rights, I should really do a word search on that and see how many times it's in there. It's practically every other word. That is the main premise of those regulations. Infection control, residents' right to live in an infection-free environment. Skin issues, residents' rights to have their skin cared for in a manner that keeps them healthy and living well. So it's always centered all around residents' rights. So just to know that that support is not just a bunch of ombudsmen saying residents have rights. It's coming from across every entity there is out there. And that's why this is so, so, so important.
That's good.
You're muted, Stephen. You're
I
muted.
just saw that.
Yeah.
I wanted to share a few other ideas from around the state, some things that people are doing this year, some things that have been done in the past. Assuming I can get my PowerPoint to work. We have a few regions handing out residents' rights themed activity pages. So the one side will have residents' rights on it listed. And then the flip side has like a word search, a crossword puzzle that are all related and themed on residents' rights. Residents' rights bingo. There is a version of bingo that is all about residents' rights. So instead of saying B3, you might say residents' right to good care. And as people are searching for that on their bingo card, you read about the resident's right to good care. Now, unfortunately, with this, we found recently that it's out of date because there's been some revisions since it was first printed. It's still a good resource. Nothing is really inaccurate. It's just not as up to date as it could be. But then also it's out of print. So if you are wanting to host a residents' rights bingo, talk to your ombudsman. They may have a copy of residents' rights bingo on hand. Not everyone has one, so no promises there. Of course, a lot of ombudsmen are presenting on residents' rights to residents, staff, and community members. And we've had a few programs that will get mayoral declarations of Residents' Rights Month. So, the president will declare, and sometimes governors will declare certain days, certain months to be celebrating some idea. We can do that with Residents' Rights Month too. So what can you do? And I'm talking to the residents who are here today. What can you do to promote Residents' Rights Month? Talk to your friends and family about your rights. Make sure that everybody knows about it. If your friends and family know about it, they're less likely to violate your rights. You want to introduce residents' rights when you're welcoming new residents. They're going to be getting a packet of information probably that thick when they move in, and residents' rights is hidden somewhere in there. If you're on a welcoming committee, if you're the resident council president, reach out to those people, talk to them, and walk them through what their rights are, what they can expect in the home. Discuss rights in your resident council. I don't know if this is a requirement, Lee. It feels like it should be, but every resident council I've sat in, they read one right every meeting. And that's really how it should be. You read at least one right, and then beyond that, you discuss it. You see if anyone has any questions on what does this right actually mean.
And that's not a regulatory requirement, but it's wonderful best practice.
Yeah. And thank you, Lee, for that insight. Yeah, discuss it. See, is the facility upholding that right? Or are there ways that the facility could be upholding that right more effectively? And then, of course, talk to the administrator about doing something for Residents' Rights Month. Of course, we've got resources further up on the in the slideshow. Karen has been putting resources in the chat. And And honestly, for the activity staff, for the administrators on this call, it can be as simple as a theme. You know, I mentioned residence rights bingo earlier. It's just bingo with the theme of residence rights. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just throw a theme on it, what you're already doing for activities. And that is the end of my presentation. So
And I'd like to share with the state, Ombudsman's office is also doing around residents' rights, because, you know, we have a saying as ombudsman is that people actually, it feels like people should be gaining more rights
mhm.
when they move into long-term care. So you don't have any of your rights taken away from you. Every right that you had prior to entering into a long-term care community still stays intact. As a human being, as a person that lives in our country, all of those rights still exist. And then when you move into the long-term care community, it does get further defined to make sure that things, like I said, mail, telephone, those things also get addressed more succinctly so that people understand that these are things that we have to be very mindful of when we move into a group situation. So the state office of the state long-term care ombudsman's office, one of the things that we've done is we've partnered with the Illinois Department of Public Health, the regulatory body for long-term care communities in Illinois. We've partnered with them, and they're going to be putting a siren out from the director of the regulatory division under Illinois Department of Public Health and from the state ombudsman, Kelly Richards. We're putting out a memo about residents' rights. And we're featuring during that memo, we're featuring the right to self-determination. And self-determination means that you as that individual get to make choices in your life that it is that you want for yourself. And so we have gone through and we have actually created a flyer that our ombudsman will also be bringing around to the long-term care communities. But this is going to be sent to every long-term care community in the state of Illinois through the siren, as well as through the system that we have at the state office for the ombudsman. So the communities hopefully are getting it 2 times so people can see how important this is. And then every week thereafter, the state office of the long-term care ombudsman program will be putting out another right. So each long-term care community will be getting 4 of these. We're picking 4 of the rights that we feel we really need to highlight so that people understand them at a deeper level. And they're not your typical rights. They wouldn't be that right, like to use the telephone in private, like I was talking about. If they're deeper rights, like the right to have a quality life. And what does that mean? What does it mean to have that quality of life? It means that you get to choose your own activities. What does your day going to look like? Structure your own day. When you want to wake up, when you want to go to bed, what do you want to do with the day? And not just going to activity programs. What do you want? What has meaningful engagement for yourself? So we're taking it to a deeper level. So it's not just about a regulation. It's about people and what they deserve to have in their lives. So be expecting to see that. And then also, we are also going to be doing, have the director for the Department on Aging and the state ombudsman, Kelly Richards, are going to be doing a proclamation, a video that will be also putting out to the public about what residents' rights is all about and why it's important. So these are also going to be tools that people can have to be able to make sure that we celebrate this very, very, very important event that happens in October every year of celebrating the Residents' Rights Month. And just some other things just to share about the Consumer Voice Conference. If anybody has anything, like I've said, please do feel free to unmute yourself and share some ideas with us. The Consumer Voice Conference is this opportunity where it brings together ombudsmen, it brings together family members and other people, long-term care communities. I was in a session earlier, residents. So they all come together collectively. And that's why it was so important to have CMS here today, to hear from everybody what it is that we need. And I have to say they were taking notes because after they did their talk, that people stepped up to the microphone and gave them ideas of what it is that they want to see happen. So these are just some things that we want you to know that is going on across the country, so that you can be aware that there's a lot of attention being put into long-term care right now. I think the pandemic, I always say the pandemic was a horrible, horrible thing, but some good things have come out of it. And that is, I think there's an increased awareness that people who live in long-term care have rights. And some of those rights were inadvertently violated when the pandemic happened. That wasn't ever the intention, but it did happen. So that's why celebrating this more than ever is really important, to bring us back to that awareness that everybody who lives in long-term care is a human being that has the rights as an American for living in our country, as well as for living in a long-term care community. Go ahead, Steve.
We've been talking a lot about what is being done around the state. And in terms of celebrating Residents' Rights Month, we've talked a lot about the different tools that are available to people. But I want to remind everyone, every resident out there, you have the number one tool, the most powerful tool to protect your rights. And that's your voice. Your voice is incredibly powerful. And when you use your voice to defend your rights and communicate what you want and what you need, your rights will be more protected than if you just stayed silent. So please use your voice. Show people the power that you have.
And I want to encourage people that are here, part of this today, to go back and look at this video again. Share it with residents. If you're a resident yourself, share it with your friends. Share it with your family members. Share it so that people can understand the importance of this topic for everybody. So with that, I will stop recording.